Welcome, everyone, to the Reinvention After 50 podcast. And today we are revisiting one of Jack's first interviews, or handful of interviews that he did a few years back with Harry Stewart. Why don't you tell us about what's changed with David over the last, 4 or 5 years now?
Yep, 5 years. Other than being 5 years older, a lot has changed for David and quite frankly for us as well. So David is kind of branched out now. He's got a podcast going. He runs a business. He's a CEO and founder of a business called Ageist. They have a fantastic website. And while they're focused on supporting brands and helping brands communicate effectively to the 50 plus audience, he's also become a thought leader in the space with his website, Ageist, and some of the work that he's doing in that space.
One of the takeaways I got from the interview was that when he first started, he had no idea he'd be at this point. And that's kind of the message that we've been talking about is you're not going to have all the answers when you start something. If you have an idea and you obviously have to have some things in place, you just got to go for it, because where he started and where he is now is amazing. Tell us about that journey that he took.
Yeah, so he's a lot like us. So he was a still photographer, did a lot of work in fashion, just a award-winning photographer, but was on the creative side, was never in front of the camera like you and I, and we're finding like doing this somewhat difficult to be in front of the camera. So he didn't have that. But early on, he decided that he wanted to do talks and he wanted to become a thought leader in the space of aging. And he wanted aging to be something that was sexy and that was cool versus the way brands treated people that were 50 and over. And so his business is two-pronged. It's one, the big part of his business where he generates most of the revenue is around advising brands on how to do it effectively. And he did that. He had that experience as being a photographer and working with many brands and seeing what was being done wrong and wanted to create a solution for brands to say, hey, that's a big market. The 50 plus market is a huge market. There's a lot of potential, but you need to reach out to them effectively. So he's doing that with that side of the business. And then he thought, okay, well, for the brands to take me seriously, I need to become a thought leader in the space. So that's where Ageist comes into place. And so he's doing that through now. He's a speaker. He's getting paid dollars to actually go speak at gigs. He's done a TED Talk, and he was like freaking out the first couple of times he was on stage, but now he's like, he can go out and talk to a group of 4,000 or 5,000 people. It's no big deal. So he's done it because he's been persistent, consistent with it. And that's everything we preach on Brand 50.
And the interesting thing about Ageist is that his website, it's a beautiful website. It's done very well. That's really more of a front end of what his real business is, which is the consulting, which has developed over the years. And that's the interesting thing about how David started this business and where it is now. So let's take a listen.
David Harry Stewart, thanks for joining me on the Brand 50 podcast again. I think you're our first repeat interview. So thank you for joining me.
Wonderful. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about Ageist and all the work that you're doing. Phenomenal platform. I really, as I said on our chat prior to jumping on here, I really love what you guys are doing. It's so fun too, because when you and I first spoke, I actually remember sitting in traffic coming home from work. I don't know why, it got this visual memory thing going on, but I remember talking to you about Ageist, and you were opening a book and talking about how you were working on the platform. This was around 2016, because I think you started in 2015.
Yep.
About 2015. Yep. So you're kind of early on into it. But before we get into all that, let me back up. Tell us about who you were. You were a fashion photographer, an award-winning fashion photographer. Kind of a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say photographer. I did a little bit of fashion, but fashion is a weird world.
Okay.
I did some of that. Mostly. So, I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I didn't really like that too much because it was too, I had to sit at a desk. I didn't really like that. So I became a photographer really early on. I had my first ad in American Vogue at 24. I was living in Paris by like 25, working for the magazines there. Moved to New York. I think my first gigs were like at Interview, and then I started working for like all of Condé Nast and Hearst. I lived in New York for about 25 years, and I've done maybe 1,000 advertising campaigns, like a dozen covers in the New York Times Magazine. And then when I was about 56, I think about a little before we met, I started Ageist. And Ageist started really as just an investigation. Like I wanted to understand, why was it that people who were my age were treated as, some kind of a medical liability, as like a problem in need of a solution? I didn't really feel that way. Everything around people my age seemed really infantilizing. And so I thought, well, let's figure out why that is. What's up with that? And why, what are the differences that people like myself and really everybody I knew, like you, what's different between us and our parents and between us and the people who weren't living like this? So we figured that out. And then we started publishing, I guess, fall of 2015. We did a little newsletter to 50 of our friends, and our great ambition was that they would remain our friends after we sent them this thing. And now, it's a much bigger thing. So it's taken a while, but it's been a wonderful ride. I really enjoy it.
So you started with 50 of your closest friends. They were your readers, if you will. But you've evolved since then. And it's been fun for me to see sort of this evolution. I know when we first spoke, the newsletter was sort of the primary focus, like getting the email, getting the newsletter out there, getting the email, getting in people's inboxes. And you had mentioned to me on our previous conversation that Ageist, the website itself, wasn't really the driver. It was more about the newsletters and everything else. Is that changed?
Yeah. So the thing about newsletters is it's one-way communication. It just goes out, right? And it's nice because it goes into people's email boxes, and it's still something. We have an awesome newsletter, and it's something that we spend an enormous amount of time and energy on. It's a real source of pride for us. We now have a much more involved website, and we started with the website really so we could have more interaction with our community. So you can comment in the web. So communication becomes two-way. We're much more active on social media now. It was almost 6 years ago. That really wasn't as much of a thing for people our age, but it's 100% now. We do podcasting now. We have the Super Age podcast. So that also, it's like another channel of communication. People get back to us with that. And the website becomes a destination at this point. So people go there, they'll, generally, like, we look at our stats and we see that people don't go and they just read a thing and leave. They go and they'll read 3 or 4 things, and they'll say, oh, okay, I'm interested in this. Oh, we like their point of view on this. And so we've become a resource in a way that it's much harder to be sort of an indexed resource if you're a newsletter.
It's funny. I'm one of those people. When I go on your website, I read 3 or 4 things. I actually, it may not go on not like a regular, every day on your website, but when I do go on, I'm like, God, why don't I go on this website more often? I mean, fully transparent, because you cover the things I really enjoy. You talk about food. I love food, health, longevity. Longevity is a big one for me, relationships and money. And I see a lot of travel. You're doing a lot of travel related things. As far as the community is concerned, what kind of community, what are you doing? I know you're doing sort of back and forth, and right now during COVID, it's probably pretty tough, but do you have community events you're looking to do, community involvement, like above and beyond just social interaction?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We had a big event that we did the year before COVID. And then in the spring of January, February, we were full bore. We were going to do a much larger event in June of that year, but then COVID happened. So we don't have anything on the books right now. I think that in-person events are really important. And it's really important for us. They're incredibly difficult. They're just so hard. It requires so much time. But I think for the community, it's a validation. When you walk into a room and you see several hundred people that are just like you, it really validates things to say hey, you're not alone. There are all these other people. And we found that was really powerful for our community. So yeah, we'll be doing more of those in the future.
That's great. Yeah. Was that your best life? Was that one of them?
Yeah.
I see that. Yeah, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
How many people did you get at that event?
That was, I think it was about 280 at that one.
God, that's great, man. Because I've through work and whatnot, I've been part of events. I've done it. It is hard to do.
Oh yeah.
And you probably had people coming from all over, right? Because you're
all over the world.
All over the world.
We had Asia, Europe, South America. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. First event, and you've got almost 300 people coming from all over the world. So that's pretty nice. I love your blogging, man. I just, I was looking at taking some notes here, and one of them was your top 10 of your best life, which I actually enjoyed. Exercise was on there, food, exercise. Posture is a big one. Posture and flexibility, man.
Yeah.
I've been working on my posture. My mother, at the age of 12, used to hammer me about my crappy posture. Now my wife of 31 years gets on me about my posture. So, but I'm working on it.
It's how you're judged when you walk in the room.
It is.
It's just a fact. And it's actually, as I adjust my posture in my chair right here.
Me too.
One of the things somebody taught me is when you sit in a chair, sit on the edge of the chair and make sure your knees are below your hips. So that'll force a curve into your back, which is good.
That's actually a good tip. I'm doing that right now. I actually roll. I got one of those little foam rollers, like the hard one. I'm doing that. Doing a lot of different stretches. But that was really good advice that you gave. One thing I noticed though on here that wasn't on here is sleep, and I find for me,
it's so funny. I was just before this call, I was recording a podcast with Dr. Michael Bruce, who's the sleep doctor.
Oh, sure.
And sleep, that was just a poor omission on my part. That if you're not sleeping well, nothing else works.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, your eating is going to be messed up. You're not going to be able to exercise because you're going to be stressed. You're not going to think clearly.
Right.
You do that for a period of time, your brain's going to rot, literally.
Yeah. No, totally. And then you did another blog too, and I thought I wrote it down here. It was a body marker. It was a blood test that you took.
Yeah, I've taken a few of those. So there's we work with a company called Inside Tracker.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Inside Tracker is really awesome. It's a blood test and it's overlaid with genetics. You do a DNA test and you wear a Fitbit. And then what they do is they're really only interested in blood markers that you can do something about. And same with the genetics. So some kind of weird gene and you have some kind of genetic disposed, some terrible thing. You can't do anything about that. So let's forget about that. It was really helpful about so my LDL was slightly high. So there was just a whole lot of things to do there to take care of that I hadn't really thought about. And then how that overlays with my genetic predisposition to certain things. I'm a big believer in personal responsibility. And it's really hard. Like if you go to your doctor, he's probably going to do a lot of these blood tests. You might not do all of them, but a lot of them. But all he's going to do is he's just going to tell you hey man, your LDL is high. We gotta watch that. What does that mean? Watch it. Huh? Can't we just, what am I do about it? Are we just going to watch it until you put me on statins?
Right. That's what they're going to do.
Right. So let's not let's have a little sense of agency here and do something about it.
Right.
So that's where they're at. And I think it's a really good company. I think they're a really great product.
Yeah. I got to check that out. And I'm all about functional medicine as we age. It's all about preventative healthcare, man, because the last thing you want to do is end up being, 50 and over and you're on 12, 15 different medications. And that's what, I hate to say it, but that's what Western medicine, in my opinion, has become.
Well, I think that one of the things that I've learned is that we have agency and we have to, this idea of responsibility, personal responsibility. So you are the pilot of your body.
Yeah.
Steer it correctly. We go to see these other people. We go to doctors. We go to, various other professionals out there, but they're really siloed in to what they're if I break my arm, awesome. They're going to be great. But a lot of other things, it's really sort of up to us to take responsibility for that. And, most of it is like you and I know, it's not exotic, genetic splicing. It's just exercise, keep your BMI down, be careful of your blood sugar, make sure you're drinking enough water, go to sleep.
Yeah.
You just do that stuff and, you're going to, I was on the phone with Dr. Michael Reuser of the Cleveland Clinic. And you just, you do those things, you're going to live 15 years longer than people who don't.
Yeah.
There you go. It's not that hard.
And your health span will be greatly improved.
Absolutely.
For me, it's all about the health span. Once my health starts to go south, and I'll call it a day, but between now and then, I want to do everything I can to live a functional and healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's what I like I love about what you're doing around health and longevity. I think it's all encompassing and all important as we age. Going back to the business of Ageist and when you started, I remember you mentioned the goal was to become, you're a media company, but you wanted to expand on that. How have you expanded? What are you doing? What have you done between that point and now?
Well, we're not really a media company. So really what we are is we're somewhere between a brand consultancy and a research company and an advertising agency that has a media front end. So most of what we do here, you don't see. So we work with large financial companies. We work with there's a lot of stuff is NDA. So I work with like the world's largest sneaker company. You can figure out who they are.
Right.
And a lot of other people to help people. We're either answering questions for people through research projects, and then we interpret it through white papers, and then we output the deliverables on these things are often some kind of content that lives on their channels in some way, or perhaps their understandings, or their something that we help their HR people or someone on the inside deal with. So that's most of what our energy is focused on. And then we also have what you see on the website. If you go to ageist.com, you see what looks like a media company and a publishing company. And we monetize that a little bit, but that's never been our focus. Like if we were a media company, we would be all about growing audience and growing advertising revenue in some way, or some other kind of revenue stream out of that. And we do that a little bit, but we don't really operate like that because, and I'll tell you the reason why is because we've had access to some of the internal financials of some companies who are like that. The amount of money they pay for audience acquisition as against the churn, it's like doesn't make sense. Like if you're in that model, you're going up against Google and Facebook. Like get real.
Yeah.
Who's going to win there?
Right.
So we have our audience is super sticky. The open rates on our emails are probably industry leading, and it's because we grow organically and we don't have a huge audience, but we're in very close touch with them.
That's great. Could you give an example of maybe one of the brands you've worked with, kind of just an overview of how you work with them and how you maybe help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, think of us as like a guide. We're your Sherpa, and we're going to help either you understand our people, or we're going to help our people understand you. So Jackson Financial. We've been working with Jackson for a couple of years. They're in the annuity space. And so they first came to us with some questions they wanted answered. And so we go out and we do a big quant survey for them. And then that comes back. So the deal with quant is you got to know the right questions to ask, the order to ask them, and who are you asking them to. So SurveyMonkey is not going to do it. Like you have to have vetted people who really are who they say they are, and you have to compensate them to participate in the survey. And these are sort of large, complex, expensive things to do. You get that back, and then questions come out of that. So that leads to some qualitative interviews. Qualitative interviews are you get people either on video, or you're going to the house for ethnographies, you're talking to them on the phone, and you're asking questions to find out more deeper reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. And then we create a paper for that, and we say, here, this is what's going on. And then they're like, okay, great. What can we do with this? And we say, okay, so now let's create some content that lives on your channels that can address very specifically these market opportunities that we've seen for you based on this research that we do. We work with people like that. For somebody like Inside Tracker, who's one of our clients, I act as sort of an interpreter for what they do. So they started out as something that an elite athlete would do. So you would get blood testing, genetic testing, and fitness tracker, so that you would be able to, like if you were an elite athlete, you would have your blood tested, frequently, like every few weeks, because that 0.1% of performance boost is the difference between being on the podium and not.
Right.
This is very important. So they started, I don't know, like 10 years ago, but now it's a much broader sort of audience they want to reach. So they want somebody who can speak to the science. So whenever we take somebody on, especially in the health and wellness space, there are certain criteria. And the first is, I need to speak to your scientists, and I need to understand that your science is real, that this is not some woo-woo something or other. Because if you're going to have me go out there and represent it to people, I need to be able to explain it, and I need to be able to stand behind it and know that it's real. So anything that we endorse, we always test it here first. We say like, okay, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, we got a list of pharma people that like want to work with us. And it's like, no way. I'm sorry. That's not I don't care how much money you got. I'm not going to work with you. Yeah. It's not, your money is not worth my reputation. So, what we do with Inside Tracker is then we talk about it through my experience or somebody on the team's experience. This is how this works. And then these pieces of content that we produce, sometimes they're audio, sometimes they're text and photos, sometimes they're video, and those will live on our channels, or almost always they get broadcast through the larger channels of the client.
It's pretty cool, man. And you're absolutely right too. You were talking earlier about the fact that it's difficult to become a media company and monetize on web traffic and everything else. It's just everybody's doing that. So having set this up the way you did, and I remember having these conversations with you way back when, and to see you evolve. I mean, you've got, I don't know, on your website, like 15, 20 brands, notable big brands that you're working with. So it's not as if you've built this thing. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Along the way, everybody has hurdles. I'm sure you have. It's funny. I went on the About Us, and it's like the employee section or whatever the team was. I think it was the team. So the last time you and I had this discussion, I think that was you and a writer and somebody else. And now I look on that list and there's like 12 or 15 people on there.
Yeah.
So you've grown.
Yeah. And that's, the good points and bad points to that.
Sure.
There's HR. I'm not the best at HR. So that's been a real learning process the last few years. Our team spread over multiple time zones. So, during COVID, that's sort of become the norm.
Yeah.
I think it's understanding too, what are your strengths? What are the things that you're good at? And how can you push that forward? We're kind of lucky because when the Wall Street Journal wants to know people like us, they call me. I'm the guy. Like, you want to know about this? I'm the guy. That's good in the sense that we don't really have the time to do client outreach or like business development.
Yeah.
Because it's all incoming and it's all we can do to like deal with that.
Yeah. That is great. And that's, the refreshing part of that is I'm glad to see that brands are recognizing that they need to do a better job of marketing and reaching 50-plussers.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know that was the case a while ago. So maybe through the work that you're doing and you become a leader in this category of business, it's definitely a positive.
People say, well, you guys have like changed the culture. No, we didn't. We were just we were like a little early.
Yeah.
And the culture has sort of come to meet us. And now people know, like, I mean, it's hard if you're like you're a 30-year-old or 40, maybe 40-year-old creative in-house at a brand or an agency or whatever. To ask you to talk to people like us, I have to ask you to time travel into the future. That's really hard. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. So it gets really confusing. It's tied up with your parents and, what you see on television and like that. So we become like essential for these folks.
And you're being generous because 40 is not really the folks I deal with on the agencies that are more like in their 20s, like, maybe early 20s.
Exactly.
So that's kind of you to say 40.
Yes, you're right about that.
No, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing that. Your podcast, tell me a little bit about your podcast. So I've listened to it. I like it. How has it been for you doing a podcast?
Well, it was initially really hard. Like every mistake you can make, I made. Forget to return the record button on. My favorite one is turn the microphone backwards so it sounds like you're talking to a pillow. And in the beginning, I just thought like, oh my gosh, how can I can't do this. But we've been doing them now for about a year and a half. And so now it's much easier. And I really like it because it's not entirely dissimilar from what we do doing an Ageist profile, except now it's actually the person's voice. And we actually have to have a conversation. And so it also, my relationship with my audience is very different now because they hear my voice every week, which is different than reading my words or something else. It's a better, tighter relationship. And I can tell by the emails that I get and the interaction, it's time consuming. And once you start that gerbil wheel,
Got to get it going.
You can't just say like, oh, well, I don't feel like doing this week. No, you got to do it.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful. And we're really lucky because, this week we had Dr. Rudy Tanzi, Harvard head of neurology, who's probably going to win a Nobel Prize. Next week, we got Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, people who are really experts in their field. It's because we have this reputation out there and people see, they go to the Web Ageist site and they're like, oh, I'm going to be part of this. This is cool, in a way that I think we probably couldn't do otherwise.
Well, you've built it, you've earned it for sure. And now it's probably a lot easier for you to get notable people on your podcast, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because they'll see who else is there.
Yeah.
So that's always the thing. Like, what company am I going to be with here? And they see the site, and we usually have a quick little chat with me, and they say, oh, like he's okay. He's going to make me sound good.
Yeah. The one thing I like about your style too, I want to let you know, is you're very conversational, which is good. And I think that just comes natural to you. The challenge I have when doing this podcast is having a conversation and looking down at my notes and making sure I'm asking the appropriate questions. Like I've had so many podcasts where man, I forgot to ask him that question. So that's a little frustrating.
Oh, what's really helpful? Before I started, I read the Barbara Walters book about how she does interviews. I mean, she was the bomb, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like she keeps file cards and like how she does this whole thing. And yeah, so I do that. I mean, I do some research on the people and I write the questions down and I go through it. And then I always let the people know in the beginning. I would say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about because I don't want to surprise anybody. I oftentimes send them the questions ahead of time and say, this is this. And I always say like, how can this be most helpful to you? Is there something here that you want the world to know about that I should ask you? That's often the case. There's like stuff that I don't know that may be important for them to get out there in the world. And so we let people do that. We very lightly edit things. They're basically, our podcasts are just run straight through. If somebody says something bad and they'll say like, oh, like cut that out. Okay, we'll go back and we'll cut it out.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I like to keep it just sort of unfiltered. It's like, this is what we talk about. Here you go.
That's great. That's really good to know. It's interesting. One of the things you said early on in this last question I just asked you is, I can't do this. Before you're doing the podcast, just like, I don't know if I can do this. I can't do this. What I find in doing this podcast is it's helped me just in my regular job. If I'm giving a presentation, if I'm talking to multiple people, you've had to do that. You're part of what you're doing as well as you've had a TED Talk. You get out there, you're involved in doing speeches and giving talks, and you're getting paid for it now. And the part I love is I remember on the last podcast, like you had just started doing it. Like I think you had a couple of things going, right?
Yeah.
You were a photographer 3 years prior, and you had the last thing on your mind was you're going to be up on stage getting paid,
zero,
right, to talk to a large group of people. It's probably the engineer side of your brain going, right? But that's pretty darn cool. You're getting actually paid to go on stage and talk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did a keynote at the Global Wellness Summit in Singapore. I've done a lot of fairly large things, and that'll start up again. But yeah, I mean, that idea of how do you get from A to B, you just got to sort of do it. And you do it in slow bits. I mean, for me, I did like a couple of smallish sort of stage things where, I would kind of like sit and people would ask me questions. But then I did that TED thing, which was like 4,000 people.
Damn.
And it was absolutely, I mean, I've done some like scary stuff in my life. That was like just as terrifying as any sort of rock climbing at anything that I've done. Because Jack, this is what happens, man. You're up on stage, they mic you up, and then there's the tap on the shoulder, go. And then you got to go out and you go into that red circle, and everything. TED is so much harder than anything else because there's no latitude, right? Everything is very tightly timed, tightly scripted. You got a lot of cameras buzzing around. And with my thing, there was pictures. And the thing is preparation. So I had drilled that thing I'm not exaggerating, a couple hours a day for 3 months. So you could have grabbed me by my ankles and swung me over that audience, and I could have delivered exactly the same thing. Because I was just not going to be that guy who loses his shit
Yeah.
And it's forever recorded in TED World as that guy.
Yeah.
And once you do that and you get off and you're like, I'm alive. It was okay.
Yeah.
Like now it's just like you could throw me on stage right now in front of 500 people and say talk for 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, let's go.
Yeah. And because you've done it, right? It's just it's from doing it and
that's
but you put yourself in that position though. And you got out of your comfort zone. And that's what happened.
Terrifying.
A lot of people in their 50s and 60s, they've lived their whole lives doing the same thing over and over and over again. And are fearful of getting out of the comfort zone. Like I never thought I'd do a podcast. You kidding me?
Right.
Or do what we're doing here. But it's empowering, man. I love doing this. I love talking to you. And I find you very inspirational. So, I mean, thank you. I guess a couple last things here is COVID. Yeah. How have you, I know it sounds like you're in is it Montana, right? Is that sure?
Park City, Utah.
Utah.
Yeah.
So you're Utah, but you're going back and forth to LA. COVID, how has it affected you, the business? I would imagine now for a lot of people, they're looking for resources like yours to help guide them in the right direction.
Interesting. Maybe. I can't tell you about how people regard us. I know that last year we were living in the Arts District in Los Angeles. We lived in a converted factory building on the 10th floor, and early March 2020, things are, we're sort of walking around in what was like hazmat suits almost. And I thought here we have a potentially fatal, unknown airborne pathogen, and I got to take an elevator 3 or 4 times a day.
Right. This
is not a good combination. We need to leave now. So we came out to Park City, Utah, which wasn't random. My best friend lives here and his wife is the CMO for a chain of hospitals. So I thought, okay, good. I get sick. I got an in. Good. And excuse me, it's a ski town and it was deserted. Like there was just nobody here. It was like a Stephen King movie. It was just like, there was just I live in a part of town, there's maybe 10,000 units of housing. There are like 3 people here. So that was great. And then we liked it. So we sold that place and we stayed here. And it was really very joyful last year because there wasn't traveling. Like we were just here. And it was a nice place to be. The business last year, thankfully, was not, the only thing was the fact there weren't, I couldn't go out and do speaking. That was off the table. But everything else, we had our business was up like 50% last year. It was great from that point of view. And if you're not constantly traveling and moving and jet lagged and disoriented, you can really think a lot more clearly.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. All right, final question. And I think this is what my second to last final question the last time, but I think we'll see. This might be my final question. What do you envision for the next 3 to 5 years? When you and I sit down in 5 years or 3 years or whatever, how do you see your business evolving?
The crystal ball question.
Yeah.
Well, what's happened here is that, when you asked me this question a few years ago, I couldn't really see that far ahead because I didn't really know what was possible. I just didn't have any day, where am I going? I don't know. Now it's a lot more clear. So there's certain things that we're really, really good at. We'll do more of that. I think that there's a very good chance we're going to move into product. So product is something we know a lot about because we help other people develop them. We have expertise and credibility. We know what works. We know what doesn't work. I think you're probably going to see some of that.
Would this be in the health and wellness space?
Yeah, that's something, we talk a lot about. And through my client work, I know the very best scientists on the planet. So, probably more of that. I think you're going to see more video. You're probably going to see increasingly very short form video, 20-second stuff and then 2-minute stuff. So we're working on that. There's going to be more. There'll be, I think especially post-COVID, you're going to see a lot more event stuff that we're involved in.
Yeah. That's great, man. It's inspiring. Guys, is there anything I missed? Is there anything you want to just...
No, I think, I'm going to share a little factoid here.
Yeah.
I talked to as I said, a lot of the leading science people, Harvard, Stanford, MIT. And I can tell you that what's about to happen in terms of health span and lifespan is going to be dramatic. It's almost incomprehensible. If you look at where all these things are sort of circling together, the sort of different technologies and science that's happening, as Dr. Michael Reuser of the Cleveland Clinic told me a few weeks ago. He said in the 90s, we said 60 was going to be the new 40. He said in 10 years, in 2030, 90 is going to be the new 40.
Wow.
That we're going to see human lifespan has expanded at the rate of 2.5 years per decade in almost straight linear lines since 1800. That's about to change. And so I tell people, like, if you can stay healthy, if you can keep your organ systems in reasonably good health in the next 10 years, you're going to be in really good shape to be around for a long time.
Yeah. And that includes not drinking a lot. And you know,
oh, God.
Not doing too many drugs and all the other.
We assume
Yeah.
that's like table stakes, man. We assume you're not smoking 4-packs a day and
exactly.
drinking a 6-pack. That's not going to do it.
So I'm 56 right now. My goal is at 80. It's been stuck at 80 now for a while to be skiing. I love skiing.
Sure.
And I now that sounds like I might have hope to ski into maybe my 90th birthday, maybe in 100.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think that you should probably plan on, assuming you don't get hit by a truck, that's something different.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be, there's a really good chance you're going to be around, I don't know, 110, 120, something like that.
Yeah.
How long are you going to be skiing? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I'll shoot for 90 now. I'm going to raise it by 10 years now. Just this conversation.
Yeah, you should.
Anyway, so David, Harry Stewart, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
The website is weareageist.com. It'll be in our show notes. Highly recommend it. You've done a great job. I can't wait to talk to you in, say, 3 years, and we'll see where you are then.
Okay. We'll see if the predictions came true.
All right, man. Take care.
Pleasure being here. Thanks, Jack.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. For more information on all of our guests, go to brand50.com, where you'll find show notes and other resources to help guide you through the next exciting phase of your life. Please consider subscribing to our podcast on iTunes, along with other platforms, and write us a review while you're there. You can also sign up for our email list on our site to get the latest podcast updates. We promise you won't get a constant barrage of emails from us, and you can bet we'll protect your privacy as well. You can also follow us on social media accounts listed on our site. Thank you for listening.